Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's presentation. Today we're going to have a bit of a history lesson on top of a discussion on a battle mech, because the Devastator is one of those machines that is a side note in history and a note in inner sphere archaeological research. It's very odd and not a machine that you will see all that often, because outside of House Davion and the Taurian Concordat, it's not very popular. So let's get into it. First off, we have to talk about archaeology in the inner sphere, in the greater periphery as well, but if you go all the way to clan space, there isn't much archaeology to do over there. A lot of people do it, including people like the founder of the Marian Hegemony, our friends at Interstellar Expeditions, and what they mostly are looking for is Star League caches and basically doing grave robbing. It's not a very fancy job. It's not very rewarding. Most of the time, all you find is scraps and bits that you might only be able to resell for minimal value. But there is, every once in a while, a whole lot of cash to be made there. Our own operation here on Archeology is basically built on an archaeological find of a Castle Bryan, as an example. The whole Marian Hegemony was founded off archaeology, even though nowadays we kind of understand that the archaeology bit was mostly a front for germanium trade. During the Succession War era, these types of research were extremely worthwhile, because whenever you recovered Star League material, you could employ them to strengthen your own position and your own forces, even though it was a very limited time offer, as if you lost any of those bits that you find from the Star League, you wouldn't be able to replace them. One such location where archaeology was done was on the planet of Hoff, which is a fairly minor world on the Combine Sun border, a place where the allegiance changes depending on who lands a military force on the planet this week. During the Third Succession War in 3023, the Wolf's Dragoon assaulted the planet for the Draconist Combine, and the planet itself was defended by a group of Federated forces and the Eridani Light Horse. Things got fairly spicy during the engagement, but what it actually did was lead House Davion to find an old Star League outpost, which had a few interesting things to offer. One thing that was recovered there were the plans for the Devastator, which was a mech that was commissioned by the SLDF right before the Ameris coup, and it was never produced in any significant amount. Numbers range between like 6 and 12 being built overall. It was a 100-ton support machine for direct fire. It was meant to have some of the best equipment available for the era, and it was a brand new machine which House Davion was wanting to build at that point. One of the problem, however, was that this very best equipment was not available to House Davion at the time. But what they had was, a frame, an engine, basic idea of how the machine should work, so they decided to try to make it work. So, what do you do when you don't have the XL engine technology or the Gauss Rifle technology, and that's what is needed to make the thing work? Well, you've got a basic chassis, you've got basic overall specs, and you've got an idea of where you want to lead this. The House Davion engineer, what they did was the Devastator 1D, which actually works fairly well. You've got a standard VLAR 300, very common engine, easy to get, and you get a speed of about 55 kilometers per hour, which is very reasonable for a 100-ton mech. You've got 18 tons of standard armor, so you are plenty tough, and you've got 15 heat sinks to try to keep you cool. It's a little bit difficult with all the weapons you're going to load on it, but it's not a terrible number of heat sinks if you know how to volley fire. For weapons, you get a pair of 10-class autocannons, a very classic Davion setup, and 2 large lasers, both of which have the same range bracket. Basically, you've taped 2 enforcers together and put them in a 100-ton mech. For close-range defense, you've got 3 forward-facing medium lasers and 1 rear-facing one. I haven't really seen many where the rear-facing one was flipped forward. I'm pretty sure they happen because that's what Mechwarriors do. But at that point, it makes it a decent 100-ton mech, not in the same bracket as your typical Atlas of the era. And it was exported to the Torian Concordat. Well, exported sometimes is a fairly loaded word here, but a few people were willing to buy it, and House Davion was willing to sell it. A lot of those 1Ds are still around, or were still around, and we've got our hands on quite a few of them as the Torians brought them into the store to get them refit. It's not a standard refit, but there's a typical refit we offered for a lot of those 1Ds when they showed up at the factory, and if you ever show up with one, well, we can easily get that taken care of. One of the main things was to generally to make it tougher because assault mechs are expensive and you want them to stick around. So the first thing we do is swap the armor for ferrofibrous, which is something we have plenty of. And the cockpit and gyro is armored. The torso ammo bins are protected by case, so if there's an ammo explosion, you lose one side of your mech and not the entire mech. When double heat sinks were available, so around 30, 48 around here, I'd have to check our records, we were able to swap those as well to improve performance on the machine. We do take out the rear-facing medium laser, and the AC-10s are replaced with Midron XL LB-10X because they're lighter, just as efficient, and the only thing you really lose is the ability to use specialty ammo. This makes it a very, very tough machine. Maybe not one of the top performer if you look at truly modern machines, but something you'll be able to rely on. On House Davion's side by 3044, they had all the necessary bits to actually build the original Devastator, the DVS-2. The engine is a Vlar 300 XL. The heat sinks are set up as double through the entire machine, so it's a little bit less tough just because of that engine, but because of the heat sinks, you're going to be able to shoot more stuff. The armor is 18.5 tons of standard plating, so a little bit more than before, and it protects a pair of Poland Main Model A Gauss Rifles with 4 tons of reloads. A very, very good long-range sniper weapon. The side torsos are mounted with a pair of PPCs rather than the large lasers, so you get even more ranged weapons and even more punch. For close range, you have a trio of Intec medium lasers facing forward and the rear-facing one. That hasn't changed. It makes it a very heavy sniper and something that can easily take the field and win the day. One of the first machines to be distributed to troops was given to General Lester J. Otto of the Federated Sons, and he was embroiled in a weird personal war against House Liao's premier mercenary unit turned House troops McCarran Heavy Cavalry. Colonel Barden of the McCarran learned that his rival Otto was on the planet of Marleth and decided to drop as much forces as possible, even though they were supposed to just lead a small raid, and crush the defenses at Fort Bourgogne on the planet. The battle was really brutal. A lot of people died. A lot of mechs blew up. But it ended with Lester Otto dead, his Devastator now in the hands of the Big Mac, which they used until it was destroyed later on. History repeats itself. A later model was developed by the AFFC's leadership in 3058 because they saw that the Devastator was good, but it couldn't last on the field very long because of how limited the ammo for those Gauss rifle were. The DV3, which is the newer version of the Devastator, basically took off the forward-facing medium lasers, meaning that your mech is now fairly defenseless if something gets within 90 meters of you, basically. But you add half a ton of armor, 2 tons of Gauss rifle reload, and a rear-facing small laser just in case something gets behind you. It's not a terrible idea. It's not a wonderful idea either. Hard to say what would be the smarter thing to do here. I'd have to play with those DVS-3s, but they're just not super common, unfortunately. From what I understand, Operation Exodus took about 6 Devastator prototypes with them, and during the kerfuffle of Operation Klondike, people wanted to use them. What we have is a little bit of battle ROM footage showing some of those being modernized, but not completely modernized to clan standard. Your arms still have Gauss rifles, but the side torsos have improved ERPPCs, a bit of weird prototype in between our own Inner Sphere ERPPC and the modern clan ERPPC. I would like to see one of those things, but I don't think they exist anymore, at least not the PPC portion. just to see if it would be cheaper to manufacture those intermediate ones compared to either of the ones we have. For closer range, they had 2 ER medium lasers that we're pretty sure were to clan standard already at that point. To keep the whole thing cool, you had 20 double heat sinks, which would be enough to soak up the heat of those ERPPCs. Gauss Rifles barely generate any heat, and the ER medium lasers if required to be shot. I don't think this is a terrible machine, just an odd one that is a footnote in history. The Muse Earth program was a weapons program to evolve a variety of machine, and the Devastator was actually one of the machines selected in that program, which actually got production in 3146 with the DVS-11, which is a bit of an unusual design in my opinion, but it's quite efficient. You still get at 300 XL engine, but now it's coupled with a supercharger and the musculature is linked with a mask. So for a short period of time, you can probably go around 86 kilometers per hour, or you can alternate and go around 64 kilometers per hour on a steady basis. Your gyro is modified to a compact standard to make room for more equipment, because it's going to need it in this case. For weapons, you have a pair of Gauss rifle, that's classic, and 4 tons of ammo, once again, fairly classic. But the PPCs are replaced with snub-nose versions, so if something gets up close, it's going to get blasted a whole lot. The lasers on the machine are actually clan grade and built by House Davion, so that's a nice thing to learn about nowadays. And what you have is a pair of forward-facing ER medium lasers and a pair of rear-facing ER small lasers, which are almost as efficient as medium lasers if something gets in your back. It's a pretty great machine with a price tag to match, obviously. Superchargers are really expensive on Fusion Engine, unfortunately. But it's a thing that I assume House Davion will build in fairly large numbers in their war against the Dragonist Combine. The Devastator is not a super popular machine, and it's not one that's common outside a specialized regiment in the Federated Forces, and sometimes in the Cordat. You will see some in Liao regiments that were salvaged from Federated Forces. You'll see some in Frank and Oregon regiments as well, because, well, they end up in our possession every once in a while. But it's not something that's going to be super common anywhere else. Ausmeric barely has any, as an example. We do see them pop up fairly often due to our position in the Rimward Periphery, and I can't say it's a bad mech, but I think I prefer the Pillager in the particular double Gauss boat range, or of course the Stone Rhino, which is one of my favorite in that particular category. If House Davion keeps getting more clan gear available, I know they're able to already build some autocannons as well using clan standards. We could very well see those 11 series become a nice 12 series in the future. Or maybe Alaric Khan will buy the plans for it and start building a whole lot of them as well. We will have to see. It's a mech that is still evolving. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later.